You will not touch another box in this house, Benga. Yewande's voice cracked the morning air like a whip. Her body wedged between the sitting room doorway and the mover holding her television. Benga folded his arms, chin lifted, unbothered. This is not your fight, Yewande. This is family property. Step aside. Family property? She let out a laugh that had no humor in it. I paid for this television with my own hand. I paid for this rug. I paid for that painting your brother hung with his own 2 hands the week we moved in. Show me one paper, one single paper that says any of this belongs to you. You will not disrespect me in my brother's house, Bode cut in, stepping closer, his voice low and dangerous. Your brother's house? Yewande's eyes blazed. This is my house. I am his wife. Where is that written anywhere that a widow becomes a stranger in her own home? Before we go further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments if you've ever watched a family turn on a widow before the ground on her husband's grave had even settled. This story is about to take you somewhere you won't forget. Let's go back to where it all began. 3 years earlier, Yewande stood in the kitchen of a much smaller flat, flour dusting her wrapper, laughing so hard she had to hold the counter for balance. Ifedayo had crept up behind her, dipped one finger into the cake batter, and smeared a streak of it across her cheek before she could turn around. Ifedayo, she shrieked, swatting at him with a wooden spoon. You will not eat this cake if you keep spoiling it. I'm not spoiling it, he said, grinning, catching her wrist mid-swing and pulling her against him. I am tasting it. There is a difference. There is no difference. You are a thief in my kitchen. Then arrest me. His voice dropped, and something in his eyes shifted from playful to tender in the space of a breath. He reached up and wiped the batter from her cheek with his thumb, slow, deliberate, his palm lingering against her jaw. Yewande. What? Marry me. She stilled. The wooden spoon slipped from her fingers and clattered against the counter, forgotten. You are not serious. I have never been more serious in my life. He took both her hands in his, flour and all. I watched what happened to my mother. I watched my father's brothers throw her out of a house she built with her own sweat, and I swore that whatever woman I loved would never know that kind of fear. Marry me, and I will spend my whole life making sure nothing and no one ever takes what is yours. Her eyes failed before she could stop them. Ifedayo, say yes before I lose my nerve. Yes, she breathed, and he kissed her then, hard and full of promise, one hand tangled in her hair, the other pressed flat against the small of her back like he was trying to memorize the shape of her. The cake burned in the oven, and neither of them noticed until the smoke alarm screamed through the flat, and they broke apart laughing, foreheads pressed together, both of them crying and laughing at once. We will tell our children, Ifedayo said, wiping her tears with his knuckles, that I propose with a ruined cake and a fire alarm going off. They will say their father has no romance. They will say their father knew exactly what mattered. You matter, Yewande, always. If you are enjoying this so far, do not scroll past without hitting that like button. It helps this story reach someone else who needs to hear it today. Now, let's watch how fast a promise like that one can be tested. The wedding came 8 months later, small and bright, Yewande in ivory lace that made her mother weep openly at the altar. Ifedayo's family attended, smiling for photographs. Benga even gave a toast about brotherhood and loyalty that made the whole hall applaud. Yewande remembered thinking foolishly that she had married into warmth. She did not yet understand that some smiles are rehearsed. 2 years into the marriage, Ifedayo came home one evening and found her setting the table, humming to herself, 7 months pregnant with Ayodele and glowing despite her swollen ankles. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her before she noticed him. You are staring, she said, smiling without turning around. I am allowed to stare at my wife. You are allowed to help me carry this pot is what you are allowed to do. He crossed the kitchen, took the pot from her hand and set it down before pulling her into him, his hand splayed protective and warm over the curve of her stomach. I saw my brother today. Benga, he was asking questions about this house, about the papers. Yewande frowned. What kind of questions? The kind that make my skin cold. Ifedayo's jaw tightened, the easy warmth in his eyes dimming into something guarded. I'm not going to let what happened to my mother happen to you. I have already started something, a protection. I will tell you everything when it is finished, I promise you that, but I need you to trust me. I trust you, she said and meant it completely, and pressed her lips to his slow and setting, her hands framing his face. I trust you with everything, Ifedayo, with my life. Good, he murmured against her mouth, because I'm about to spend the rest of mine keeping that trust. Neither of them knew, standing there in that warm kitchen with the baby kicking between them, that he had perhaps 6 more years to keep it. The morning it happened started like any other. Ifedayo left for the office in a grey suit, kissed Yewande at the door with Tomiwa balanced on her hip, and Ayodele tugging at his trouser leg begging for one more piggyback before school. This evening, Ifedayo promised his son, ruffling his hair, I will carry you round the whole compound this evening, I swear it. He never made it home. The call came at 2:47 in the afternoon. A brain hemorrhage, sudden, merciless, no warning at all. One moment he was signing a contract at his desk, the next he had collapsed, and there was nothing anyone could do. Yewande remembered almost nothing of the hours that followed, except the sound that came out of her own body when the doctor said the word gone, a sound that she did not recognize as her own voice, raw and animal and endless. She remembered Ayodele, 7 years old, asking her that night, Mommy, did Daddy forget his promise? He said he would carry me round the compound. She had no answer for him. She simply held him until he cried himself to sleep in her arms. Tomiwa curled against her other side, 3 years old and too young to understand why the house had gone so silent. The wake was cold in a way Yewande had not expected. Ifedayo's family arrived in their finest lace, embraced her with practiced sympathy, murmured sorry with dry eyes and calculating glances that swept the compound, the cars, the furniture, cataloguing rather than mourning. Benga's wife asked within earshot whether the good china was a wedding gift or something Ifedayo purchased himself. Bode stood by the gate for nearly an hour, on his phone, his voice low but not low enough. Yewande caught fragments. The house, the papers, we will see what she has. She told herself she was imagining things. She told herself grief was making her paranoid, that surely a family did not descend on a woman burying her husband like vultures circling a carcass still warm. She was wrong, and she would learn exactly how wrong 4 days later when the first truck pulled into her compound before she had even finished dressing for the day. If this story is gripping you already, this is your sign to comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from. I read every single one of them. Stay with me, because what happens next is going to break something open in this family that can never be closed again. The knock came sharp and fast. 3 times, no pause between. Yewande opened the door still in her nightgown, hair wrapped, and found Benga standing on a veranda with 2 men she did not recognize behind him, and behind them, a truck idling in her driveway with its back door already rolled up and waiting. Good morning, Benga said, brushing past her into the house before she could respond. We are here to collect the family's things. Collect what? Yewande followed him, her voice rising with every step. Benga, what is this? The house is being cleared, he said. It's flatly, already gesturing to the movers, pointing at the television, the sound system, the dining set Ifedayo had bought her for her 5th anniversary. Everything of value stays with the family. You understand? You were his wife, not his blood. I was his wife for 8 years. I bore his children. I stood beside him. And now he is gone, Bode said, appearing behind his brother, arms crossed, his eyes flicking coldly over her nightgown like she was already an intruder in her own home. This house belongs to me, Yewande's voice cracked. Fury and grief tangled so tightly together she could no longer separate them. "Show me the paper that says otherwise. Show me." "We do not need paper," Yewande said, already turning away, already waving the first mover toward the television. "It's the family. This is how it has always been done." That is when Yewande planted herself in the doorway, arms spread wide across the frame, and said the words that would open this whole story. "You will not touch another box in this house, Benga." Her voice loud enough that Ayodele came running from the back room, 7 years old, and already learning what it looked like when the world tried to steal from her mother in broad daylight. "Mommy," his small voice cut through the hallway. Tomiwa peeking around the corner behind him, small fists clutching the doorframe, eyes wide with fear she was too young to name. And something inside Yewande went very still and very cold. She was done being talked over in her own house. "Ayodele," she said, keeping her voice steady, though her whole body trembled. "Go and hold your sister's hand for me. Mommy will handle this." She turned back to Benga, and for the first time that morning, there was no shake left in her voice at all. "You want to know what your brother left me, besides 2 children and a broken heart? Come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow and I will show you exactly what Ifedayo left behind, and you will wish you had never brought that truck into my compound." Benga laughed, short and dismissive, and waved the movers forward anyway. "Tomorrow, next tomorrow, it does not matter. Take the television," he told the men, and they moved past Yewande as though she were furniture herself. She did not scream. She did not fight the men physically, small against their bulk, useless against their numbers. She simply stood there, watching pieces of her marriage carried out into the daylight, one by one, her children clutching each other in the hallway behind her, and she let the fury settle into something quieter and far more dangerous than tears. Because that night, long after the truck had driven off with half her sitting room inside it, Yewande would sit on the floor of Ifedayo's old study, surrounded by boxes the movers had not thought worth taking, and she would find the envelope he left her, the one he promised all those years ago in a kitchen that smelt of burnt cake that he was building for her. And everything was about to change. If you have made it this far, you already know this story is far from over. Like, comment, subscribe, and stay with me, because the next part is where Yewande finds out exactly what her husband did to protect her and what happens when she finally stands up and makes her family answer for what they took. The study still smelled faintly of Ifedayo. Old paper, cedar, the cologne that used to cling to his shirts long after he had taken them off. Yewande sat on the floor, cross-legged amid boxes the movers had dismissed as worthless, her back against his old bookshelf, and let herself cry properly for the first time since the funeral. Not the performative tears she had worn all day for people watching her, but the real kind, ugly and gasping, her whole body shaking with it. "I don't know how to do this without you, Ifedayo," she whispered into the dark room. "I don't know how to fight your own blood for what is mine. Ifedayo, why didn't you tell me they would come like this?" Her hand brushed against a shoebox tucked behind a stack of old files, and something about its weight made her pause. She pulled it into her lap and opened it slowly. Inside sat a single brown envelope, her name written across the front in Ifedayo's careful handwriting. Not Mrs. Yewande Adisa, but simply Yewande, the way he always wrote it when the words that followed mattered more than the formality. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. "Yewande, my love, if you are reading this, then something has happened to me, and I am no longer there to hold you the way I promised I would every night for the rest of our lives. I need you to breathe before you read further. I need you to sit down if you are not already sitting. 3 years ago, I transferred this house into your name alone, not joint ownership, yours, fully yours, no one else's, not even mine anymore on paper. I did it quietly, without telling my brothers, because I know my family, and I know what grief does to people who always believe inheritance is theirs to take, rather than something to be given. I watched what they did to my mother. I watched her stand in a doorway just like this one, begging men who call themselves family to leave her the bed she slept in, and nobody came to help her. I swore that would never be you. So, I built you a wall out of paper, out of law, out of everything they cannot argue against, no matter how loud they shout. The deed is in the small safe behind the bookshelf. The code is our wedding date. Show it to no one until you have a lawyer standing beside you. Do not fight them with your voice alone. Fight them with the truth, and let the truth do what shouting never could. I love you more than these words can hold. Tell Ayodele and Tomiwa their father kept every promise he made, even the ones he never got to say out loud. Yours, always, Ifedayo. Yewande pressed the letter to her chest and wept again. But this time, the tears carried something other than grief. Relief, fury, resolution, sharpening itself into a blade. She found the safe exactly where he said it would be, punched in their wedding date with fingers that would not stop shaking, and pulled out the deed. Her name, only her name, notarized, dated 3 years back, unmistakable and unshakable. Thank you, she whispered to the empty room. Thank you for keeping your promise. If you are still with me, drop a comment right now telling me what you would have done in Yewande's shoes. Would you have confronted them that same night or waited? I want to hear from you. And if this story has your heart racing already, smash that like button before we go any further, because what happens next is the moment Yewande stops being afraid. She did not sleep that night. By 6 a.m. she was dressed, the deed sealed carefully in a folder. Ayodele and Tomiwa fed and dropped at her sister's house with instructions to keep them there until she called. By 9 a.m., she was seated opposite Barrister Folake in a small office that smelt of old law books and strong coffee. Folake studied the deed for a long moment, her expression unreadable, before she finally looked up. Do you understand what this means, Yewande? It means the house is mine. It means more than that. Folake leaned forward, tapping the document with one manicured finger. It means every item they removed from that house was removed illegally.
It means you can demand full restitution. It means if they refuse, we take this to the police and to the courts, and your husband's family will be the ones explaining themselves, not you. Yewande's throat tightened. I don't want a war, Barrister Folake. I just want my children to grow up safe. I want them to stop looking at me like I am someone who can be pushed out of her own life. Then we will not give them a war. Folake's voice softened, but her eyes stayed sharp. We will give them the truth, delivered so firmly they cannot twist it. I will draft a demand letter today. Full inventory of everything taken, 48 hours to return it, or we proceed with legal action. You will not raise your voice once. You will let the paper speak. And if they refuse, then they will learn what it costs to steal from a woman who has the law standing beside her. Folake managed a small, grim smile. Trust me, I have handled families like this before. Confidence is their whole weapon. Take that away and they crumble faster than you think. Yewande left the office that afternoon with the letter in hand and something steady rebuilding itself in her chest, brick by brick, where fear had lived only hours before. The 48 hours passed with agonizing slowness. Genga called twice, his voice dripping with false concern, asking if Yewande had reconsidered and wanted to settle things peacefully as family. She did not return either call. Bode sent a message that read simply, "You will regret this," and she screenshotted it and sent it straight to Folake without a single reply of her own. On the third morning, Yewande arrived at Ifedayo's family house with Barrister Folake beside her, the deed and the demand letter in a leather folder tucked under her arm and her spine straighter than it had been in weeks. Ayodele had begged to come, insisting he wanted to stand beside his mother,
And after a long moment of hesitation, Yewande had agreed. Some lessons, she decided, a boy needed to see with his own eyes. Genga opened the door, and his easy sneer faltered the moment he saw the woman in the sharp charcoal suit standing beside his sister-in-law. Yewande, he said, recovering quickly, forcing warmth back into his voice. You did not need to bring... This is Barrister Folake, Yewande said, cutting him off, her voice calm and clear in a way that startled even her. She is here because you left me no choice. May we come in, or would you prefer to have this conversation on your veranda in front of your neighbors? Something flickered across Genga's face, the first crack in his certainty. He stepped aside. Bode was already in the sitting room, arms crossed, his jaw set defensively the moment he saw Folake. What is this? Ambush? This is a courtesy, Folake said smoothly, taking a seat without being invited, opening her folder with unhurried precision. One I am not obligated to extend, given that what happened in this house's compound 4 days ago constitutes theft under the law. But my client would prefer to resolve this as family if you are willing to behave like family. Theft? Genga's voice rose indignant. That was our brother's property. Was it? Folake slid the deed across the table. Read the name on this document, Mr. Genga. Read it carefully, then tell me again whose property you removed from that compound. Silence stretched as Genga's eyes scanned the page, his jaw tightening with every line. Bode leaned over his shoulder to read it too, and his face drained of color. This cannot be right, Bode muttered. Ifedaya would have told us. He did not owe you an explanation for protecting his wife, Yewande said, and for the first time, her voice broke slightly, not with fear, but with grief. You came into my home 4 days after burying your own brother and stripped it like scavengers. You did not even wait for the ground to settle. Do you understand what that did to me? Do you understand what your nephew saw that day? She looked at Ayodele standing quietly by the door, watching his uncles with an expression too old for a 7-year-old's face, and something in Genga's posture finally cracked. Yewande, You am not finished, she said, and the whole room stilled. I trusted you. I called you brother. I stood at your table for every Christmas, every naming ceremony, every celebration this family has had for 8 years. And the moment my husband died, you looked at me like a stranger to be removed. You do not get to call this family and mean it only when it benefits you. Folake let the silence hang before speaking again, her tone brisk and businesslike. My client is prepared to pursue this through the courts, which will be public, costly, and will not reflect well on this family's name. Or you return everything taken in full within the week, and this ends here. The choice is yours. Genga looked at Bode. Bode looked at the floor. The bravo that filled Yewande's compound 4 days earlier had drained out of both men entirely, replaced by something smaller, uglier, the particular shame of men caught doing exactly what they swore they had every right to do. We will return it, Genga said finally, quietly, not meeting Yewande's eyes. Not quietly, Yewande said. You will return it the same way you took it, in daylight, in front of my children, so they can see that what was wrong has been made right. Comment below and tell me, do you think Genga and Bode deserved forgiveness after this, or should Yewande have taken them to court regardless? I want to know your honest thoughts. And if this story has moved you even a little, hit that like button now so you never miss what happens next in stories like this one. The furniture came back 3 days later, carried by the same men who had taken it, under the flat afternoon sun, with Yewande standing on her veranda watching every piece return to its place. Genga did not meet Yewande's eyes as he directed the movers. Bode said nothing at all. Only a set of her late mother's jewelry never resurfaced. Quietly sold, Yewande suspected, though she chose not to chase what could not be undone. Some losses, she decided, were the price of a lesson learned too late. That evening, once the house was whole again and her children were finally asleep, Yewande sat in Ifedayo's study with his letter pressed against her chest and allowed herself for the first time since his death to feel something like peace. You kept your promise, she whispered to the quiet room. Now let me keep mine. The following week, Yewande visited Barrister Folake again, not for a battle this time, but to draft her own protections, a will, an account in her children's names alone, untouchable by anyone but them. She would not wait for tragedy to teach her the lessons Ifedayo had already learned the hard way. Ayodele, watching his mother sign the papers, tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, are we safe now?" Yewande knelt and pulled him close, pressing a kiss to his forehead, the way his father used to do. "We were always going to be safe, Ayodele. Your father made sure of that a long time ago, and now so have I." If this story touched you, do not scroll away without hitting like, subscribing, and leaving a comment below telling me where in the world you are watching from tonight. I read every single one, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. Thank you for watching until the very end. There are many more stories like Yewande's waiting for you. So stay close, because next time, someone else's silence is about to break too.